Hi there. HBO just released the first official teaser trailer for House of the Dragon, the Game of Thrones prequel series. We had no idea this was coming out this early. Now, a lot of people rushed to post their immediate reaction videos to YouTube as soon as possible. Well, then what you get is a 1-minute video of someone reacting to a trailer with no context and no further information. I don't want to do that to you guys, so this isn't a chronological, frame-by-frame, in order, one-at-a-time analysis of the trailer, because sometimes we were just looking at candles, or a sword, or a horse or something. It wasn't anything new. That this is based on a prequel book, the novellas, that were written 8 years ago. We have known they were turning it into a TV show since they announced it beginning of November 2019. That I'm not going to sit here and explain, well, this is who Rhaenyra is, and this is who the Velaryons are. You know that. You should know that. Or there are other videos, you can look that up on wikis. What we are focused on right here is what changes might they be making in the adaptation process, because we've seen how much can change in Game of Thrones. Biggest question is, how much story is Season 1 going to cover? What's the Season 1 stopping point? Will the Targaryen Civil War begin at the end of Season 1, or will they stretch things out until the end of Season 2? Which is actually what we want them to do. We want them to develop all the characters instead of rushing it. So I'm focused on takeaways, informational points of substance, and I narrowed it down to 7 big things. Because, hello, if you're new to my channel checking this out because the trailer came out, I have been heavily following all the spy photos and set leaks we've been getting for this as it was filming throughout the summer, since they began in Cornwall back in May. So we've seen a lot of this. I mean, we've seen good spy photos of young Rhaenyra. We've even had promo photos of Matt Smith as Daemon Targaryen back in May, so I don't need to waste time here explaining, well, this is who Daemon is. I've even seen him in costume before in official promo photos. So we're focusing on what stuff can update it. So the information accumulates from one of my videos to the next. Please check out the earlier ones if you haven't already. That this is building on the research we have already done up to this point. But I think it's still pretty easy to follow. I'm not going to fall back on, as I said in last week's video, I think you know who Alicent and Rhaenyra are, or you could find that out from a wiki, so this is the new stuff. A few things first. I am surprised at how quickly this teaser trailer came out. That 2 days ago, on Sunday, I posted a quick video, just like a 10 minutes audio only, saying, oh, I think that the first teaser might come out as early as 2 weeks from now on October 17th. They promote it by putting it out during the Season 3 premiere of their big Succession show. And a lot of people called me premature for saying that. They said, no, we'll get a teaser at Christmas, a full trailer by February, following the pattern of what they did other times. Just, no, they want to get it out. People are complaining that there isn't anything. I was called premature for saying it would come out 2 weeks from now. And then 2 days later, here it is. So I'll take that other video down. But the big points in it really stand, that we were the hardcore, the core fan base following all the news about this. It is hard to imagine that the general audience that doesn't follow this, even follow YouTube stuff that much, the only thing they really pay attention to are when trailers come out. There's millions of people who didn't even know they were making a Game of Thrones prequel series until this teaser trailer came out. And I've seen this in prior Game of Thrones seasons, like the activity only, like in the break between seasons 3 and 4, all the fan activity just picked up again right after the first teaser came out. Casting news, people don't even react to casting announcements. It's the video, the footage, the content is what really starts things up again, because we have been living in a fallow time. This fallow period for the past 2 years. Worse than the one in 2018 between seasons 7 and 8, because, Benioff and Weiss salted the earth as they left because it was a downward spiral for years, but the spell was finally broken and people saw, wow, they ran this show into the ground. It has no rewatch value. It's not just season 8. The entire second half, once they abandoned the books, is awful. Well, this show is made by entirely new people, and hopefully things will turn around for this franchise, but if nothing else, it's caught people's attention. Now, I'm recording this relatively late in the day because first, I took the time to research it thoroughly. Second, my neighbor was running a wood chipper all day, so I couldn't record until after nightfall. So I had time to watch everyone else's reaction videos and see what points they may be bringing up or questions they might have raised. So as of when I'm making this late Tuesday night, this trailer has been online for about 12 hours, and it's already gotten over 5 million views on YouTube. It's not quite, the most viewed video on the HBO Max YouTube channel yet, but it's less than a day. It's up to 5 million. The honor of most watched video on their channel, which is the bar that's been set that we hope to break, is the trailer for the Snyder Cut of Justice League. Back in January, the big fandom event, we were all free. The publicity behind that for years and the promotion of just waiting for there's the lost Snyder Cut. So, of course, that's understandable. But even then, it's been 10 months and they're up to 28 million. Let's see if we can approach that, because we already got 5 million in a day. You never know. One other setup thing before I get on to the 7 points, this is sort of point 0, is I'm really happy that they began with a title card saying 200 years ago. 200 years before the Targaryen dynasty fell in Robert's Rebellion. Because this has been a thing for us throughout the past summer, throughout filming since casting started, that they're adapting the second half of an anthology book that Martin has said Fire and Blood is an anthology of prequel novellas. The second half is about the Dance of the Dragons, the Targaryen Civil War. First half is about Targaryen conquest. And it's multiple prequel shows could be based off of it. So because it's a collection, the back blurb on the back of the hardcover says, set 300 years ago. And it starts 300 years ago, but it covers entire generations past. That the Targaryen Civil War starts 100 years after the conquest, 200 years before Game of Thrones. And even their official website, which was just a single page, you could tell whoever threw the website up just copy-pasted the blurb off of Amazon or something. And it became sort of a fandom joke, this international fandom joke, because I'd see the Portuguese Twitter channels, the Italian Twitter channels for Italian language YouTube channels, shout out to the Citadel and everyone. We'd all be making fun of, they still haven't updated the damn website. It's still just the back blurb of the book. It inaccurately says 300 years. Why do we care about that? Well, because everyone copies the official website, so in good faith, news sites would then start going, well, I guess it starts 300 years ago with the conquest. And we're telling them, no, they just copied it wrong. It's a different story. It's from the middle of the book. And they didn't update that until 2 weeks ago. Finally, it was 1 week ago. It was really recently. And we collectively cheered that they finally updated that because of the misinformation that people who, general audience who in good faith have not read this book but want to watch a prequel show weren't getting a straight answer about something as basic as what time period is it set in. So I didn't think they'd be stupid enough to accidentally say 300 years ago on a title card in the trailer. The website was stupid enough to do that, but actually take a moment to imagine how hard this would have been if I assume they would have said nothing, that there wouldn't have been a title card saying 200 years ago, because we're used to stupid people running this franchise, right? That you or I would go, well, right from the beginning, in the first teaser trailer that gets everyone's attention, and we should very clearly and succinctly enunciate with a title card so people catch it that 200 years ago in nice big friendly letters, so people comprehend that and it sinks in. This is the setting. We would do that. The stupid people who used to be running HBO wouldn't see the common sense in that and would have, kind of forgotten to put in a title card explaining, well, when is this exactly? So I know it's kind of silly to praise the absence of stupidity and, wow, look at your common sense, but the 300 years ago thing had become quite the bitter fandom joke over this past summer. that they haven't updated the website. They haven't updated the website. And that the trailer beautifully begins with a title card saying 200 years ago, something people can grasp. If you're unfamiliar with this, I will say there are time skips in it. The actual Civil War begins about 170 years before Game of Thrones. That the story starts when Rhaenyra is a child, and there's time skips of 20 to 30 years, then the Civil War happens. You see her grow up, and then the Civil War happens when she's a mother herself. But it's giving the backstory on, well, why did she develop this rivalry with her stepmother that turned into a civil war with her half-siblings? That you need to show that to explain what's going on. But it starts 200 years ago, and season 1 will have time skips of at least 20 years. We know that. Like how The Crown has time skips in it and covers years in a given episode. But this is all good. This is all to be expected. So that was point 0. I felt compelled to point that out. Hooray! The very first teaser trailer, the one people are going to watch the most, not some other preview character trailer put out in February. A beginning is the most delicate place to make sure that the balances are correct, that this is the foundation that everything is being built upon, that the first teaser trailer needs to up and front really clearly say, this is set 200 years ago, and they got it right. Just imagine how hard this would have been if they didn't do that. So after all that set up, the 7 big takeaways from the first teaser trailer. Number 1, basic starting point. First looks at some characters that we hadn't seen in full costume before. Want to focus mostly on informational content, but how costumes can convey story detail. Brief shot of Millie Alcock as young Rhaenyra. This is new. Well, we've had good spy photos of her before, but this is our first really clear shot of her. And what this confirms, because we've never had this clear of a shot of an actor's eyes before, even in the promo photos back in May, look at her eyes here, that this confirms beyond any shadow of a doubt that House of the Dragon is not bringing back Valyrian purple eyes, unfortunately. That in the books, the Targaryens, all Valyrians, their ethnic appearance isn't just that they have platinum blonde, silver white hair. They also have purple eyes. They cut this from Game of Thrones because they said it was difficult or something, and I don't know, but we kind of have hope that they'd bring it back for this. Hey, The Witcher gets to have yellow eyes and stuff, but they're not bringing it back. And this is something to ask them in a Q&A of just, well, why didn't you bring it back? For continuity, or because it was also, the logistics were difficult? Why don't we get that? This is also a different costume than the ones we saw in spy photos. This is really elaborate. I wonder if this is Rhaenyra's mother's funeral, because we see a lot of candles and she's wearing black. We also got a very brief shot of Mysaria, which is good to have because we didn't even have a spy photo of Mysaria before this. This is our first look at her, but it's a headshot. We can't see any of her costume, so there's nothing to analyze. That Mysaria, Lady Misery, Daemon's Spymaster, that it's good to have a photo of her to put into wiki navigation icons and group shots and stuff. There was nothing before this. But now I want to see what her costume looks like, but we'll see that when it comes. These are 2 minor points, though. A new shot of young Rhaenyra, a new shot of Mysaria. The big thing here is that epic shot of all of House Velaryon being introduced at the royal wedding. And here is where it pays off that I took the time to actually review all of this, because when I watched the trailer the first couple of times, I thought that in the background, the woman sitting next to King Viserys at the royal feast table was Queen Alicent. It's not. On closer inspection, it is clearly young Rhaenyra. And behind them, of course, are these giant banners, one with the Targaryen sigil, one with the Velaryon sigil. And everyone's wearing really great clothes, different from what Corlys wore in the promo photos, and they're gilded in gold. That, without question, this is the Rhaenyra-Laenor wedding feast scene, that they forced them into an arranged marriage to unite their houses. But we knew they would film that. We've seen other spy photos of Laena's funeral, which is after this, and we saw them filming young Rhaenyra and Laenor on the beach. We saw them courting or being forced to do that because it's arranged marriage. So we knew we'd be seeing a wedding scene like this. It's not new informational content that way. It's nice to see the characters, though. We've already seen Corlys, but we hadn't seen Rhaenys before, or any of the other ones. I mean, we knew Eve Best was Rhaenys, but it's nice to see her in full costume like this. Rhaenys is a popular character. Really great. She exudes that regal sense. She played Cleopatra, the Antony and Cleopatra Shakespeare play at the Globe. She can really play a queen like that. I think it's a great casting. The issue is, I stressed out a lot about trying to analyze their costumes, and I realize it's a fool's errand, that these are unusual wedding costumes. Like, how much did Marjorie Tyrell's wedding gown for the Purple Wedding reflect what her typical look was like her classic gowns from season 3, where they're teal with the cutouts and the overall structure, that wedding outfits look unusual, so we shouldn't stress out too much about trying to gain meaning from them, that they're unusual, they're different. Because I spent a couple of weeks back in August putting together this 2-hour-long documentary on the history of medieval fashion, and how does House of the Dragon reflect that? Because they skew a little later than Game of Thrones did. It's like around the year 1500, where it's a mix of early Reformation, late Middle Ages. When Game of Thrones was a little before that, but they want to show this as a golden age where there's been 50 years of peace, there's prosperity, everyone's doing great. So I can see why they want to use stuff from a later period, slightly later. And you see bits of that in the young Rhaenyra shot, she's wearing a French hood. That's something Anne Boleyn would wear. But I can't really make anything from what Rhaenys and Laena are wearing in this. That they're not even that similar to each other. That Rhaenys has a V-neck, Laena, it's straight across the top. The only linking feature is that they tend to have narrow sleeves, which we saw that before with Rhaenyra. Then I said, I think she has the same style the Velaryons do because they're her allies. They have narrow sleeves. That Tudor style from the Reformation, what Anne Boleyn wore, had these huge billowing sleeves, that they don't have that. So that's the one thing I can point to, that they have tight sleeves. Other than that, it's obscured too much by the fact that they're special wedding costumes. It could be anything. Nice to see them wearing jewelry, like earrings and stuff, as I always point out, because Game of Thrones didn't have that. And that Rhaenys has her hair swept up like that. We saw a bit of that in spy photos, but you can see how Rhaenyra imitates Rhaenys because she respects her. There was a question of, did the Velaryons copy Rhaenyra's look because she's an influencer, or did she copy bits from them? Like how Daenerys copied bits of looks from the Dothraki, bits of Slaver's Bay, and turned into her own look. Rhaenyra is influenced by the Velaryons because they're her allies. And I've talked about this when we got the first look at young Rhaenyra, that she starts out having long hair with tiny braids in the back. But by the time you see adult Rhaenyra, she has these coiled braids in the back of her head, which make her look a lot more like the way Rhaenys wears her hair, coiled in the back. That through season 1, you will see Rhaenyra gradually dressing more Velaryon. And this evolution of that, I think it's a good story to touch. Other than that, there's not much more we can say costuming-wise, which smoothly leads into point 2 related to this shot, Velaryon casting announcements. That some of these people you see on screen in this shot, we had no idea they had joined the show at all until this trailer was released, and they simultaneously put out a press statement of, here's new actors and casting descriptions for their roles. And of these 4 actors, 2 of them we had already suspected, 2 were entirely new to us. The first 2 are actually one character, young and adult Laenor. We had heard rumors of this. Obviously, we pretty much saw young Laenor and confirmed he was Theo Nate. Slightly less confirmed was there have been rumors for like 3 months that adult Laenor is played by actor John McMillan. Turns out that was entirely true. That's now confirmed. later on, when he's having a sword fight, that's not young Laenor, that's adult Laenor by John Macmillan. The other two actors, though, this was just announced today, that Laena Velaryon here is played by actress Savannah Steyn, Steyn. I'll have to look up how that's pronounced. And when I say Laena Velaryon, it's young Laena because she's on screen with young Laenor, her brother. They'll probably cast an adult Laena at some point because they go through the year 120 at her funeral. We're waiting on that. But the interesting one we didn't anticipate was actor Will Johnson, Will stands for Wilbur, as Vaemond Velaryon, who is featured very prominently in this shot standing next to Corlys. He is not a background character. Physically, literally on screen, he's not in the background. And he's prominent enough that they gave him a relatively early casting announcement publicly. This isn't like Alton Lannister, a minor cousin, who has a few speaking lines. This early, you felt the need to announce who Vaemond is. Means that he's probably going to feature relatively prominently in the storyline. I did not anticipate. I'm happily surprised that they're introducing him this clearly. I thought he'd be cut. There's a chance he'd be cut. Because you see, in the books, it's a running joke in the book fandom that there's always another minor Velaryon cousin waiting to randomly pop up as needed. That in the main books, there's also a lot of minor Lannister cousins, but Martin would spend a whole page, drop the narrative, and have someone explain, all right, these are the 4 brothers of Tywin's father, and these are who all their children were. And if you follow it with a family tree, it's easy to know, oh, okay, that's the 4th brother. He had a bastard daughter, Joy Hill. It's presented clearly. In contrast, the wider Velaryon family tree was just leaked through different prequel novellas in dribs and drabs. And we spent so many weeks debating the structure of their family tree because Martin didn't publish one. We had to make one for the wikis and stuff and gradually piece together, okay, these are who all the Velaryons are during the Dance of the Dragons, and there's a lot of minor cousins. Now, I say the second big takeaway from this trailer is Velaryon castings. The title of the second point might as well be Vaemond Velaryon. That's the big point here. And it touches on 2 key things that I said are the reasons I'm making this. Analyzing story changes and condensations, and the question of what time frame is Season 1 going to cover? Is the Civil War going to begin at the end of Season 1, or are they going to expand other storylines in Season 2 to give more time for character development, which is what I actually want them to do? I talked about this in my previous video on the implications of the castings for the Small Council. That we know that they're filming at least through the double funeral of Laena and Laenor, because he dies 2 weeks after she does. The Year of the Red Spring, year 120. The Civil War doesn't begin for another 9 years, almost 10 years after that, in 129 AC, when Rhaenyra's father dies. So the question is, are they going to have a time skip and just start the Civil War by the end of Season 1, or are they going to expand on storylines from near the end of the Rogue Prince novella? And what was there? Well, one subplot was that Otto Hightower returns his Hand of the King and stacks the Small Council with Hightower loyalists. And I listed off another subplot that they could expand on in Season 2 if they choose not to rush to the end to get to the Civil War, but give setup, is this internal conflict within House Velaryon. That it comes to a head after Laenor dies, that the next ranking Velaryon, that the person behind him in line of succession, Corlys's nephew, says, look, I wasn't going to complain while he was alive and he could have more children, but Laenor's 3 sons with Rhaenyra are blatantly bastards. They are not his sons. They look nothing like him. You should name me the heir to Driftmark. Corlys refuses, and then they threaten to rebel. They go to the king about it. Daemon fights them. It's this whole palace intrigue. that comes to a head in the 120s. And this is more than I hoped for. And when I was toying with the idea of maybe they're going to pad out season 2 a bit, they introduced Vaemond very prominently in an official announcement. He appears very prominently on screen. He's not just some minor servant. He's walking next to Corlys like this, in front row as they're being introduced, walking into the wedding feast. Are they setting up Vaemond for a subplot in season 2? That is one of the main questions I want raised by this video you're watching right now. Please talk about this in the comments. So the first issue was, this is a point towards maybe they're going to pad out season 2. And I'm not pad out in a bad way, like invent some subplots for the Starks and Lannisters to do, because they mention things that happen off screen in the books. Maybe we should see Cregan Stark rebelling against his uncle, and the rise of Tywin Lannister on the Small Council. That the thing the Velaryons would be doing is dealing with Vaemond rebelling against them. Second point this brings up, given all of the minor Velaryon cousins, is you would have to condense them into one character, or into 2 or 3 characters, and I don't blame them for this. I don't expect all of the Silent Five, even lesser cousins, to be distinct speaking roles. So the issue is that in the casting description, it says that Vaemond is the younger brother of Corlys and a commander in the Velaryon fleet. But in the books, Vaemond is not his younger brother. He is his nephew through his younger brother, who doesn't even get named in the text. So they have apparently condensed these 2 characters together. I'm not complaining his father wasn't even named, he wasn't a character. But this brings up that we are already seeing at least some condensation of the Velaryon family tree. I don't blame them for this. We saw this with the Lannisters, even like seasons 1 and 2 of Game of Thrones, and no one really complained that Alton Lannister is like a condensation of Cleos Frey, who is a Lannister on his mother's side, and a few other characters. That, yeah, you couldn't have that many minor cousins make a condensation character. I'm fine with that. But the implication of this condensation is more than one person has, of course, brought up the issue of the race changes to the Velaryons in the TV show, and I have made multiple videos saying I actually think this is a good idea. It helps differentiate the lower-ranking Valyrian families who don't have dragons. And I've made longer videos. The books imply this more than once, particularly in the sections of the World Book about Pentos. They say, oh yeah, the lower-ranking Valyrians that didn't have dragons, the ones who went out to the overseas colonies, the ones that went to the outer provinces, yeah, they weren't as strict about blood purity as the high-ranking families in the capital. Fine, that's actually an interesting world-building point, that it's a colonial empire, that Driftmark and the Stepstones and stuff, that's like Barbados compared to England for them. These are the outer provinces that will how are these minor families different. I made a big video about this when the casting was announced in February. I recently made another one when we found out that House Celtigar is going to be in the TV show. And they're another minor Valyrian family that follows the Targaryens but don't have dragons. And I said, like, well, what if they're like gingers or something? Because they intermarried with the locals from Cracklaw Point. That, they intermarried with the First Men so much they look ginger. Why, they don't even look Valyrian anymore. Yeah, the lower-ranking families aren't as strict about that. Fine, they'll do stuff with that. And there's quotes, even in Fire and Blood, I found a new quote where they reiterate, the Pentoshi are mongrels. They're Valyrian settlers who intermingled with the locals because they didn't have dragons. So, as I've said before, I draw a distinction between minor changes that don't break the rules of the Storyverse, and you're not taking this seriously, you're just plain breaking the rules of the Storyverse. I felt this worked within the framework they'd established, and, it's world building. Well, what are the lower-ranking families like? But one of the big points people kept specifically bringing up is, well, why don't later Targaryen generations look racially intermixed? Why doesn't Daenerys look like that? Because she's 9 generations removed. For that matter, 100 years after this, a Targaryen marries a Dornish princess to bring Dorne into the realm. And neither Daenerys nor Jon look Dornish, even though they have some Dornish blood in them. That's just the looks get thinned out over time. But minor spoilers, Daenerys and Jon aren't direct descendants from Corlys Velaryon. That a generation or two later, a Velaryon girl from a younger branch of the family, Daenerys Velaryon, married the Targaryen king. So I said, oh, this could work out if only like Corlys's mother is like a Summer Islander merchant princess they married for, his father married to secure some trading rights or something. Aegon III, oh, he marries some younger Velaryon cousin that didn't really affect anything. That would work out. That wouldn't contradict itself. And even then, even if they do have him marry a mixed race girl, it's just what? It got thinned out over time. But marrying a minor cousin who doesn't look like that, that's fine. The issue is that in the official book family tree, Daenerys, sorry, I keep mispronouncing that, is the granddaughter of Vaemond, who would share the same bloodline through his grandmother as Corlys. Whoever his mother was would be his grandmother. The fact that they're changing around and condensing and mooshing around bits of the Velaryon family tree, we're no longer sure that TV Daenerys is the granddaughter of Vaemond. Yeah, maybe she's like the granddaughter of Jorgen or something, one of the other lesser uncles and cousins. So I think the writers, whatever they do, we'll have to wait and see with the Velaryon family tree in the TV show. The point is, it is useless to bring up that specific complaint, but Daenerys is Vaemond's granddaughter. We're not dealing with the same family tree. They're changing parts of it. This is something I would ask the writers about. Matter-of-factly, not accusingly, well, how are you going to work that out? If you've moved Vaemond from being his nephew to being his younger brother, fine. How does that interconnect now? So that's positive for me, that the fact that they're condensing it, and you would need to condense this, means they can condense it in such a way that it doesn't contradict anything, that it removes the potential contradictions. And on top of that, the fact that they announced Vaemond so prominently point towards that Season 2 might not race towards the Civil War. Point 3 is really quick, and I already covered this, that later in the trailer we see adult Laenor played by John McMillan. And he's fighting a man with a sword. They're not training, they are really trying to kill each other in the castle hall at Driftmark. You can tell from the tapestries it's Driftmark. In the books, Laenor gets killed in a quarrel with one of his companions in a marketplace, not in a castle. So either they changed that, or this is some other invented confrontation. I say invented, it's an outline, they can fill in the blanks. This is some other confrontation, and maybe someone will step in and break it up before one of them dies. Like maybe Corlys will come in and go, enough of this, stop fighting. That it seems like someone's accusing that either a relationship thing or something about the succession with his sons. I'm not sure if this is Laenor's death scene. If it is, it means they changed it. For the moment, we have no reason to think that it's his death scene. It's just some other invented confrontation. So of the first 3 points, these are nice images to have. The biggest thing was the implications of Vaemond for maybe Season 2 will be doing other things. The other points I have are unrelated to the Velaryon specifically. Point 4, the tournament scene. They changed this tournament slightly, and I don't have a problem with that. That there's 3 big tournament scenes in the books that would cover this time period. There's the tourney at Maidenpool when Viserys ascends to the throne. The third one is the melee tournament at Rhaenyra and Laenor's wedding. But 3 years before that, the second one is the Blacks and the Greens tournament, where they show up wearing black and green gowns and everyone starts copying that. This is the first one, but it's not at Maidenpool. You can tell because you can see young Rhaenyra and young Alicent there. For a while, someone asked, well, are we sure that's young Alicent? Actually, the young Alicent actress, Emily Carey, confirmed on Instagram, she posted a screenshot of it. Hey, that's me. So, okay. That the big tournament Viserys becomes king and Otto Hightower becomes Hand of the King, so Alicent arrives at court and everything. They hold this big tourney at Maidenpool, where Criston Cole beats everyone in the joust and the melee. He's amazing, and he does so well, he impresses Viserys into appointing him to the Kingsguard. So this is a big opening event, and this confirms pretty much the earliest event we see. We saw Rhaenyra meeting Alicent before, but this is a pretty early event in the timeline. First off, it's at Maidenpool, which is in the Riverlands, southern Riverlands, and ruled by House Mouton. The slight change they made was they moved it to apparently Horn Hill, the seat of House Tarly. That's a good idea, because it's talked about vaguely in the prequel novella. It covers a sweep of years that says starting around the year 112, Rhaenyra was old enough to start traveling the tourney circuit to court all the young men and lords who would come to ask her favor and try to make her fall in love with them. And it didn't really work out with any of them, but they were all vying for her hand. And it says here, she was courted by Lords Frey, Oakhart, Tarly, Tully, Tyrell, and both Lannister twins. So, I mean, the books do say she was visiting the Tarleys, as well as Maidenpool. So they condensed that. They moved it from Maidenpool to the Tarleys, which is great because Game of Thrones never mentioned the name Maidenpool or House Mouton. Makes more sense to hold it somewhere that people are familiar with. And actually, in terms of the story of the Dance of the Dragons, the Tarleys are more important. The Tarleys actually are characters in the Dance of the Dragons, that of the Seven Kingdoms, different ones side with Alicent or Rhaenyra. Like the Starks side with Rhaenyra, the Lannisters side with Alicent and her son Aegon II. Unusual case is that the Reach itself was divided. Usually they followed as blocks. All of the Westerlands, all of the North sided with one or the other. The Reach split down the middle. That the northern half of the Reach sided with Rhaenyra, the southern half sided with Alicent, because that's where Old Town is. So they had to fight their way through the northern parts of the Reach to get to where everyone else was in the Riverlands, turn into a whole theater of the war, this internecine war in the Reach, as brother fought brother and vassal fought vassal, and it got really messy. And the three big northern vassals who turned on the Hightowers were House Rowan, House Caswell, and House Tarly. And I've talked about this in forums and stuff, that it makes sense to treat the Tarleys as the front man of these Reach rebels, because the audience is familiar with them. So it's all falling into place that they want to set up the Tarleys fairly prominently, so that 3 seasons down the line, they can explain the Tarleys have turned on the Hightowers. And one of the big questions I've had is, are they going to cut Daeron the Daring? Because he's Alicent's son who has to lead their army through the part of the Reach that turned on them, fighting Tarleys. The fact that they're taking this much time and prominence to show the Tarleys, that they're setting them up with a big tournament moved from Maidenpool to Horn Hill, this is another point towards maybe they're not cutting Daeron. Maybe season 3 and 4 will include the Reach campaign, the Battle of the Honeywine, which is a major battle. That the head of House Tarly in this time period is Alan Tarly, is his name. That Daeron's army has to fight Alan Tarly leading the Reach rebels against the Hightowers. So this is good. This is, of all the changes they've made so far, we're going to use Vaemond prominently. We're going to use the Tarleys prominently. We're not omitting stuff from the Reach. We're actually expanding the Reach instead of Riverlands houses that weren't introduced in the TV show yet. So this is all good news. And I have to tell you, the question of why did they release this trailer when they did, we're pretty sure they filmed this joust just last week. That we know the horses came to the tournament set last week for this. And because it was the very end of the England shoot, I think that's why they released it now, because they're all moving to Spain now. They wrapped filming in England just this weekend. Other points we can glean from the tournament: a lot of my time was spent slowly checking out all of the heraldry. Yes, this is Criston Cole at the tournament. You can recognize his shield is House Cole heraldry, which means he's not a Kingsguard yet. Also, he's not wearing Kingsguard armor, because when you join the Kingsguard, you don't carry your own heraldry anymore. Other heraldry that is visible is Stark, Lannister, Tarly, Bolton. That yellow starburst on blue is House Lefford of the Golden Tooth, one of the Lannister vassals. There was another one that's light green on dark green, which might be Manderly heraldry in bad lighting. And lastly, there's this heart with a blood drop, which might be House Corbray heraldry at a bad angle. And, that's the difference between the people who are hyped for, oh my god, a Stark sigil, like, I know what that looks like, I'm not surprised, versus, wait a minute, when you're a hardcore Fire and Blood reader, my first reaction was, what's that House Corbray heraldry doing there? What is that? When you're picking apart the really little details. Gotta warn you, when people are, oh my god, it must be a Stark, the house banners are like national flags. I mean, knights in service to the Starks carry their heraldry. They're not Starks by blood. Same with the Lannisters. Like Sir Hugh of the Vale carried a Vale sigil, but an Arryn sigil, but he was working for them. He wasn't an Arryn. We were a little confused by this, though, because, Starks don't really go to the tourney circuit in the South. They're not knights. They think it's wasteful. They don't do the chivalry thing. We know the Lannister characters are there. It's very possible that the Lannister twins are in the stands for this, and will talk to young Rhaenyra and young Alicent at this specific scene. And so, actually, yeah, we saw a Lannister sigil. There very probably are Lannisters in this scene from the court. The Stark one, they might have just put that in the background, though. I mean, think back to the tournament in Season 1 of Game of Thrones. They put in a lot of heraldry that we didn't ultimately see. Like, we saw Bolton heraldry, even though they weren't characters at the tournament. We saw Lefford heraldry, even though they weren't a speaking role. They're putting stuff in the background. It's Easter eggs for nice details. I'm not trying to shoot you down that we will see Starks in this prequel era. Cregan Stark is a major character. It's just, you're wondering, why are book fans being the screen door on our submarine? Why are they being so cantankerous? It's because Cregan Stark is so serious he wouldn't waste his time at a tournament. It's frivolous. It's a silly thing to get hung up on. I do think, or hope, that Cregan Stark appears prominently because he actually has a major storyline. In his backstory, it explains, well, during the events of the Rogue Prince novella, he wasn't in that, but later on, he narrates a flashback, basically, that, oh yeah, in my youth, during that time period, my uncle had usurped my rule over Winterfell, and I had to lead a rebellion against him. That's good for a TV show. It's just, I don't think Cregan will come to the South. I think they'll, follow a messenger to the North, dealing with teenaged Cregan dealing with his uncle. So I think Cregan is in this. I just don't think he's in this tournament scene. And the last big point about the tourney at Maidenpool, which is now the tourney at Horn Hill, is aging up the characters. Like I said, we know this is Millie Alcock as young Rhaenyra and Carrie as young Alicent, and they're both around 18-ish. In the books, Rhaenyra was about 7 years old when this happened, and she fell madly in love with Criston Cole because he fought so well that day, and she asked that he be her personal sworn shield. Now, you can do that in a medieval society that, like Robb Stark gets married and has sex when he's 16 in the books. This is just, it's a medieval society. Daenerys has sex at 13 in her first chapter. This is medieval society. And I've talked about this in videos leading up to this. We assume that they'll be playing around with the timeline due to the fact they need to age up the younger characters. This is just confirming we're not going to see a 7-year-old Rhaenyra at the tournament. She's going to already be 18 when she first sees Criston Cole. I am fine with this change. Legally, they had to do this change. I don't think anyone's arguing in the opposite direction. Also talking about the tournament, not the joust, when they shift to the melee, which was actually earlier in the trailer, but I think it's the same event. These both happened at the same thing. Wow. Epic Targaryen armor on Daemon. You can tell it's Daemon because he's holding Dark Sister. And this looks exactly like a lot of fan art and even commissioned art for Rhaegar Targaryen's knight armor. That what would Targaryen armor look like? Well, it'd be black for their heraldry and would have dragon wing motifs on it. And we've had a few behind-the-scenes spy photos that people say, oh, this armor looks terrible. I'm saying he doesn't have the shoulder pieces on or anything, that he stripped off his outer armor. This is just the underlayers of it. We haven't seen the full armor yet. Well, here it is. This looks like Aemon the Dragon Knight or something from other artwork, or Rhaegar. Just a full Targaryen knight wielding Dark Sister in a duel. This looks awesome. So I don't want to dwell on it too much because, it's not much story stuff. We knew this should happen. It happens at this tournament. Given that his opponent is wielding a Morning Star, not a flail, a thing on a chain. This is a solid piece, a Morning Star. We're pretty sure that his opponent is Criston Cole. And some people have pointed out, well, Criston Cole beats Daemon in this melee. Why is Daemon beating him? Well, he's beating him at this instant. You know how TV is. That at the last minute, Criston will get the upper hand and beat him down. When we see the full scene of this is just at this point, Daemon is slashing at him. He's going to whack him with his Morning Star. That he beats everyone at this tournament. That's how he gets to be on the Kingsguard. Well, how could he beat him? Well, they say a Morning Star is an unusual weapon, and a lot of people aren't used to fighting against. It's different than fighting someone with a sword. That it's unusual to fight someone with a mace with a Morning Star. They're less experienced with it. Then we come to takeaway point number 5. This scene of Alicent looking really upset and rushing towards the camera at someone off screen. This is probably the scene where her son Aemond just had his eye slashed out in a fight by one of Rhaenyra's sons, which happens at Laena's funeral. As all the adults are gathered for the funeral, he sneaks in, tries to steal Vagar, her dragon. The boys fight over it. Aemond is older than them, so he nearly overpowers them, so in self-defense, one of them pulls out a dagger and slashes at him and accidentally slashes out his eye. So Alicent is obviously furious that my son has been permanently maimed. That I don't think in and of itself this scene is bad for the show. This is what happens. This is a bad scene to put in a trailer, because it is not representative of Alicent as a whole. She's actually calm and collected most of the time. The direct example I'd use is, imagine if the first and only shot we got of Catelyn Stark in a trailer back in Season 1 was of her desperately fighting off the Cat's Paw assassin who had that dagger. Think about it. That no, Catelyn isn't in fight scenes. This isn't a thing. This is the one time Alicent goes berserk, and I don't even think the show is wrong for showing that a calm, collected character, if your son was maimed and his eye put out, you'd freak out, because you're human. I don't blame them for that. It's a nuance thing. This is the one time she loses her cool. Don't show it as the one example of this character when it's supposed to be an out-of-character moment. It's taken out of context. It was silly to put this into the trailer. I don't think, but that's the trailer, people. In terms of the show, I don't have a problem with it. That once we realized, oh, it's probably Aemond got hurt, yeah, that makes sense. The bigger issue that this clip raises, and which really is point 5, the big takeaway, is Harold Westerling is clearly behind her to the left, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Harold Westerling died years before this happened. Of natural causes. There was a time skip and he died of old age. He actually died like 8 years before this happened, in the year 112. This is the year 120. And to the right side of Alicent, you see it's blurry, so we can't use this for photos, but I'm pretty sure that's Criston Cole. We don't have a photo of him in full costume yet. We have good spy photos. This wouldn't change that much in the grand scheme of things if Harold lives a bit longer, because Graham McTavish is a great actor and they want to use him. But I wonder if part of the story is that without Harold's presence as this wiser older knight, that one of the reasons Criston went astray is because he didn't have Harold there anymore. Or maybe it's like an Obi-Wan and Anakin thing where he was chafing under the restraints of Harold that Harold told him not to love. And he's like, how can I not love the woman I'm guarding? They might play that up. So that's an open question of, it's not a terrible idea. People aren't freaking out about it, but just how would the character dynamics change for Kristen and his affairs with that he loves Rhaenyra and that he hates her, with that Harold is still alive? And how are they going to play that? So that's a change that they have clearly made, and we already knew they were playing around with the timeline a little, because as I said, Rhaenyra is already 18 at the beginning of this, so maybe you don't need to have him die. He's actually not that big of a character in the novella in print, but they imply, he's Lord, it's like a sentence going, he's Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. You get the impression that he's important. Notice that dead last, I put that idiotic dagger, the Valyrian steel dagger, because so many other, the casual channels are just, oh my god, it's Arya's dagger that she kills the Night King with, or even ignoring that, oh, it's the dagger that... It was a Valyrian steel dagger that that Joffrey actually stole from Robert to give to an assassin to kill Bran, because he's a sadist. And Littlefinger later found out about this and on the fly made up a lie about it to trick Catelyn into hating the Lannisters. Season 7, the TV show honestly thought that name-dropping this dagger made the death of Littlefinger plot make sense. That, look at us, we're worried about continuity. No. This is absurd. Events are just magically falling into place with literal magic from Bran. No one raises an objection to that. But we remembered that dagger. I sure must be paying attention. I don't know who I'm more disgusted by. Benioff and Weiss for doing that, or the people who genuinely believed it was good writing because they remembered the dagger for Littlefinger. And that you can tell they're trying to force significance upon it. That, oh, but yeah, he uses it to kill the Night King. You admitted you didn't know she would kill the Night King with that thing until you were writing season 7. Like, this was not something that Martin planned. There was no prophecy around this blade. I don't blame the House of the Dragon showrunners for including it, because I think maybe they just put it in as a nice Easter egg, and again, the trailer person thought, I don't even think that they put in this scene because of Alicent. I think they put it in because of the dagger. And the person making the trailer thought it was too cool to pass up, in spite of what the writers intended. Because if you think about it, and the book fans have been discussing this in the forums like Westeros.org, we're not really that upset about this on the hands of the writers. We are upset about how people are reacting to it. That there are only 200 Valyrian steel blades left in the entire continent of Westeros. They don't make them anymore. Valyria was destroyed. So it's not really that implausible that someone in the Dance of the Dragons era would have one of these rare weapons that someone later had in Game of Thrones. There's only 200 of them. And the Targaryens themselves are the people who had the most of them because they are Valyrian. So, fundamentally, Littlefinger had to get that dagger from somewhere. It's not a special dagger. It's not Bilbo's sting or Gandalf's glamdring. It's just a dagger that was used to frame someone. It has no higher significance than that crap in season 7 and 8. I mean, it'll be a nice nod that, it stands to reason that there's a couple of Valyrian steel daggers floating around King's Landing to the savvy buyer, and that Littlefinger could, buy one because he's a rich man, and there's a couple in the city because the Targaryens used to live there. There's only 200. I don't have a problem with that. Ryan Condal seems like a nice guy. From the interviews he's given, and he seems attentive to the books. They might have just put that in as an Easter egg. And I think the trailer people, it's this double failure of we need to emphasize the dagger when it was supposed to be this surprise cameo, combined with you're showing Alicent in her one very out-of-character moment, that the entire point is you see her calm for most of the season. This is the one time she loses it, because her son has just been maimed. You do not show that in a trailer, and someone just thought the dagger was more important. At least that's what I think happened. Does that make sense? So I'm more upset that this is the ghost of the hype train that was going on in season 7 and 8 about that goddamn dagger. I don't even blame the House of the Dragon writers. I kind of blame the person who put this in the trailer. And I don't think Alicent is rushing at someone to knife them. That she doesn't have a firm grip on it. It's like she's holding it up, hilt up, but not firmly, as if holding it up as accusing evidence. That I think this is like Luke's dagger. I think this is the dagger that Luke had on him, and he instinctively slashed him to get him off of his brother. So that's fine. It'll be annoying if they're heavy-handed about it. If it was supposed to be a tiny Easter egg, that's actually fun. We'll see what happens. It's not that big of a question to me in terms of story, unless it's a massive invention. So far, it seems just like an Easter egg. If someone gives a 10-minute speech about how important this dagger is, I will, of course, be upset. We have no reason to think they're doing that. But all the other things, the deviations here, keeping Harold alive a bit longer is probably the biggest one, but I can see arguments for that. They are changing the timeline anyway. The Vaemont Velaryon stuff, plus setting up the Tarleys, implies we'll see a lot of stuff in Season 2 before the Civil War. I said I was making 7 big takeaways. The last 2 are actually nitpicks, and I'm already going far too long on this video. It was supposed to be 15 minutes, but there's just too much to talk about. And hey, the immediate reaction videos were 15 minutes. I hope you want a 40-minute one now that's actually covering the important parts. Not, oh my god, there's Blackfire, but, okay, well, what is the implications for the upcoming story? I've been trying to keep this as short as I can. So points 6 and 7 are just, wow, I'll tell you right now, the scene of adult Rhaenyra with Daemon on the beach was filmed in the day, but it's actually set at night. They used color filters. And point 7 is they use the 4-legged version of the Targaryen dragon heraldry, which is kind of stupid. But because they're not really serious points, but just things I am obsessed with, and I want to give focus to them, I'm going to split those off into their own videos. That the core takeaways were these things I just listed off. That I'm starting to think Season 2 won't have the Civil War. They'll spend more time on necessary setup. And the Harold stuff of the butterfly effect, the dominoes of him being alive longer. So, thank you for coming if you're new. I'm making a lot of these videos because there's a lot to discuss. And this is, of course, backlogged the giant hour-long report I had on all of the filming they did in England the past month and what we think they're filming in Spain and what this tells us about when Season 1 will end. So please like and subscribe. There is much to go over.